Welcome to another wonderful edition of Standards in the Spotlight right here on your nation station, DBS Radio. I am your host this evening. My name is Joseph Fadul, and of course, welcoming you to another wonderful edition. It's the edition of January 27th, 2025, and tonight, the topic for tonight is developing a national standardization strategy. One guest in studio, Naomi Bani Sampson, join us in studio, technical officer at Standards Development, the Bureau of Standards, and Dr. Mikebi Walcott, consultant, UNIDO funded NSS development project. A pleasant good evening to all our listeners and welcome to this great and informative edition of Standards in the Spotlight, brought to you by the Dominica Bureau of Standards. Once again, I'm your host, Joseph Fadul, and tonight we'll be discussing the development of a national standardization strategy for Dominica. This strategy, of course, signifies an important step towards identifying and addressing the priority areas for standardization to support our nation's growth and development. Once again, joining us on this evening's discussion, Mrs. Naomi Banis Sampson, Technical Officer in the Standards Development Unit of the Dominica Bureau of Standards, and once again, Dr. Mikebi Walcott, one of the consultants working on a UNIDO-funded project to develop national standardization strategies in 7 CROSQ member states, including Dominica. Ladies, good evening to you. Welcome to Standards in the Spotlight on DBS. Good evening, ladies.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Fadul, and good evening, listeners.
All right. Just before we get into the meat of things for tonight, of course, the Standards Bureau of Standards program has teamed up with Dexia, and of course, some great information coming in. The Bureau of Standards wishes, of course, Dexia wishes to inform the general public of its current offerings of fertilizers sold at its Bayfront office with delivery at the multipurpose pack houses in Goodwill, Roseau, and of course in Portsmouth. And of course, some very bits, some interesting information coming in. Now we have the root crops, which is 12, 24, 12. They are now at $60, which means that the price has actually been reduced. Originally, the price was $75 for all the fertilizers. The root fertilizers, which is 12, 24, 12, is now at $60. Also, reduced price is the 5, 4, 30, which is the first stage of root crops and plantains. That is also at $60. And also at $60 is the all-purpose 15 fertilizer. That's at $60. And at $65, the 16 8 28 for tree crops. That is at $65. We're going to repeat that throughout the program right here. So the price has actually gone down from $75 to $60 and or $65, depending on which one you want. It's sold at the Bayfront office with delivery at the multipurpose pack houses on Goodwill Road, and it's also sold and delivered at the pack houses at Longhouse in Portsmouth. So the prices are cheaper, and persons in the north can now get their fertilizer in the north instead of having to come to the capital. So great news for the farmers out there. Please check out the good folks at Dexia for your fertilizers. We'll of course repeat it throughout the program. So let's get into the meat of the program tonight right here on DBS. Of course, tonight's topic, once again, developing a national standardization strategy. Key question, we will need to understand the term national standardization strategy. Whenever we begin our episodes right here, we always like to take a moment to bring some clarity to our topic, get some definitions, just to see how, we better understand things. Tonight we're going to shed some light on the term national standardization strategy. It may sound straightforward, but can you tell us, Mrs. Bani Sampson, what is a national standardization strategy and why importantly, is it important for us in Dominica?
So, a national standardization strategy, we call it NSS for short, is a comprehensive framework that is designed to guide a country's approach to the development, adoption, and implementation of standards. And those standards typically align with the economic, social, and environmental goals for the country. Most importantly, it identifies the priority areas where standards can drive economic competitiveness, enhance public safety, promote innovation, and support sustainable development. So, the NSS is typically tailored to address a country's specific challenges. It can also capitalize on a country's unique opportunities, and it can help to align with any relevant regional and international frameworks, such as CARICOM standards. We are part of the whole CARICOM CSME, and WTO Technical Barriers to Trade (TBT) agreement. In terms of its importance, Dominica, we know, is a small island developing state, so what we call the SIDS. And as we evolve as a nation, we have goals and we have aspirations. For example, becoming the world's first climate resilient nation, or another goal, agriculture contributing $700 million dollars to our GDP by 2030, and all the other goals and aspirations that we've set. So, in order to achieve those, we have to set the priorities that will facilitate us reaching those national goals. And standards, you can be sure, will play an important role in doing so. And also, looking at our country as part of the whole global village, we want to stay on par, or we want to be competitive, globally. And so we need to pick out what are our priority areas and work towards them. And that's where the strategy comes into play.
All right. Now, other than, of course, the importance of it, I have a follow-up question. Why no? From what I'm gathering, this seems to be around for some time, but why specific? Why has it been decided like no, we need to get into it? Why is the Bureau looking to actually develop a national standardization strategy now? And from your perspective at the Bureau, how, other than the 1 or 2 points that you highlighted, how else will the strategy enhance the work of the Bureau? Because we know that the Bureau does quite a bit. We've been here almost twice a month for some time. It will definitely change up things that the Bureau can do. How will it help the Bureau? And in addition to that, I'm probably giving a mouthful. I don't want the train of thought to lose. Local businesses, stakeholders, how are they also going to benefit from that?
So, the easy answer would be, because we are talking about the NSS now and it being part of a regional project, the easy answer would be to say that the funding is now available, to develop the document. But what we want to keep in mind is that our world is moving fast. I can think back on the last 10 years and even over to the last 20 years and see that we've had so much more advancement. So many things have changed. And so you want to be able to keep up with the pace of the changing world. So we've had advances in new technologies like artificial intelligence now, being a big thing. The evolving ways of conducting international business or trade. You hear a lot of talks of sustainability and climate change and the management of various resources, among so many other things. So if we do not get ourselves up to those regional and global standards and even our own national standard as a country, essentially we Dominica will get left behind, and so that will also have many negative implications for us as a country and us as individual people. So we have to align with the regional and international frameworks, especially because we are members of so many, again, regional and international agreements and organizations. So you have to get on board or get left behind. And so we have, I think I mentioned earlier, CARICOM and CSME, WTO and the TBT agreement, and there are so many others. It would take us an entire radio program to name them. In all fairness, and like you indicated earlier, it's not our first time that we are doing an NSS or National Standardization Strategy, but every few years we have to reassess and refocus our priority areas for developing standards. So 2025 sounds like a good year, to do that. And firstly, the hope is that standards would have been developed on the priority areas set before. So we know work would have already been done. So you either need to pick up from where you left off or pick out new areas for development. So it also guides our work at the Bureau as well. It helps us to know where to focus our energy, what initiatives, what programs should we plan and implement. And an NSS also helps to strengthen the Bureau's relationship with its stakeholders. It makes collaboration between government agencies, private sector stakeholders, and other organizations, even regional and international, much easier. So, because again, when you align with other organizations and other agencies and the government, what they're doing, it helps everybody to accomplish more, with less resources. And so everybody will also get a chance to see where they fit in that strategy. And even in the preparation of the document, stakeholders and the public, they get to have a say, and that will further ensure a participatory approach to standards development, which will help to create ownership and accountability as well, of the citizens, while we all while addressing the national priorities more effectively.
Right. Yeah, I really and truly could not have said it any different. I just have one very, very quick follow-up question on that particular aspect idea. And I'm not saying this I'm not asking in a negative way, but to a certain extent, are we kind of trying to catch up with what is out there so that we can kind of be on par or at a much higher level than where we are?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't use the word catch up, but
Uh-huh.
I would probably say that you want to ensure that you are moving with the rest of the world.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, there we go. So, of course, we at the Dominica Bureau of Standards are being up to the times as best as we can. Now, the development of a national standardization strategy, or like you said, NSS, for Dominica is part of a regional project funded by the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, or UNIDO. Tonight we have joining us one of the consultants on this project, Dr. Walcott. Good evening to you, Dr. Walcott. First of all, thank you very much for joining us live virtually, and of course for being here with us virtually and in Dominica as well. Dr. Walcott, can you tell us, a bit more about this project being implemented in the region? Because, of course, we are also part of, the Caribbean region. Tell us a bit more about the project being implemented in the region, Doctor.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to speak with you and the larger Dominican audience tonight via this media. The development of a national standardization strategy for Dominica is part of a broader regional initiative aimed at strengthening the quality infrastructure across Africa, the Caribbean, and the specific group of states. And so you can see that UNIDO has really extended the reach of this project to ensure that there is I guess, equitable sharing of resources across the world within the different regions that they work in. This project, although being implemented by UNIDO, is actually being funded by the European Union, and it's being implemented in partnership with the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality CROSSQ. And the focus is on enhancing the competitiveness of micro, small, and medium enterprises in the various regions. The project on a whole has a number of objectives. These include improving the governance and quality and the regulatory infrastructure. It also involves increasing the access to value chain quality services, promoting the culture of quality, and improving the business environment for the purpose of attracting investment with the implementation of robust quality systems and conformity assessment systems. So this is being done for Dominica and 6 other CARICOM member states. These include Guyana, Suriname, Belize, Dominica, St. Kitts, and the Bahamas. The NSS is really going to serve as a critical roadmap to align national priorities with regional and international standards, something Mrs. Banis previously mentioned. And then this is focusing on ensuring that the goods and services produced and offered in Dominica meet market requirements, both locally and globally.
Dr. Walcott, I want to ask, you mentioned a few countries. You have to admit, some of these other countries, as compared to Dominica, are much, much, much larger. They have much bigger industries, much bigger businesses. I want to ask, how does a regional collaboration like this, how does it enhance the effectiveness of individual national standardization efforts? Because I'm sure a product, businesses in Guyana or the other countries, they may have, specific implementation ways and so on. So how is this going to enhance the collaborative effort that we want to take the approach like how we are right now? The collaboration like this and the effectiveness of individual national standardization efforts, Doctor?
Okay, so regional collaboration significantly enhances the effectiveness of any individual national standardization effort for a number of reasons. One, it ensures that there is alignment, and so there's also the benefit of resource sharing, and this is where this project is coming in, where we are able to share resources. You're seeing the work of 2 consultants coming into this project to do the work in 7 member states. And it's the collective strength is important. Through CROSSQ, the Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, there was the development of a regional quality and standards policy. And so the individual CARICOM member states are also working towards ensuring that there's the implementation of this regional strategy. As it relates to resource sharing, for example, where there are similarities in relation to priorities for a particular sector, you can see the coming together of the different regional entities to develop maybe not a national standard, but more effectively a regional standard. So this is where the collaboration will enhance the effectiveness of any individual strategy because you will see resource sharing taking place. You will see regional collaboration in relation to the development of the standards. And also, this will help enhance for the region interregional trade, for example.
Well, of course, interregional trade, one of the benefits. What are some of the expected outcomes? And I want to be specific to this. What are some of the expected outcomes of implementing the national standardization strategy for us in Dominica, Doctor?
Okay, so implementing the strategy, like any strategy, the hope is that once a strategy is developed, there is going to be implementation. And with the implementation of the strategy, it is expected to have a number of impactful outcomes for Dominica and the other countries that are implementing their strategies. We will see the benefits to the economy as a whole, benefits to individual businesses, and also benefits to consumers. We're talking about the impact in relation to enhancing trade opportunities. This is important because Dominica standards will be aligned to regional and international requirements, which would make it easier for local businesses to access new markets, not only in the CARICOM area, but internationally.
Do-
So that's improved market access, improved competitiveness, for example. With the use of standards being developed, you can see the modernization of certain practices or industries or businesses, ensuring that for the benefit of consumers as well, that these goods and services that are produced will meet quality and safety standards um, expected by consumers. And so this is why the focus is for this project to ensure businesses, especially the medium-sized and small enterprises, are better positioned to participate in global trade. I spoke about consumer confidence in the products and services being produced locally, and as a whole, the positive impact on the economy, again, impact more regional integration. So these are some of the expected benefits from the implementation of the strategy.
what have been some of the challenges putting together and being able to, let's say, make one benchmark standardization across all these different islands? And you mentioned early on a phrase, all of these different cultures of quality. What have been some of the challenges that have been faced?
Okay, so just for clarification, the objective is not to develop one strategy for each of these seven countries. Each of the countries will have their own strategy because each of these countries have their unique economic and social activities that will be identified as priorities for them. So, for example, agriculture may be a significant priority for Dominica, whereas, for example, in the Bahamas, maybe tourism is more of a priority. When we talk about tourism in Dominica, I will say that the focus for Dominica appears to be more along the lines of ecotourism. So there will be unique elements in the strategy, speaking to the unique challenges and opportunities for each of these countries. Where there is the benefit doing this from a regional perspective is when we identify similarities, then we can work on the development of those standards together. And so that is something that needs to be clarified. Again, Dominica, and the development of the strategies are going to be based on what are the economic and social priorities for Dominica. During my research and work so far with Dominica, I was speaking with Mrs. Banis, and something I found which was quite unique to Dominica is its goal to become, the first climate resilient country in the region. So that's unique to Dominica as we speak. And so it will be interesting to see how, through the national standardization strategy, there will be initiatives for standards development to assist Dominica in meeting that objective.
All right. Thank you very much for that response, Dr. Walcott. It is 7:30. We're going to take a break, but just before we take the break, right here on Standards in the Spotlight, Dexia wishes to inform the general public of its current offerings of fertilizers sold at its Bayfront office with delivery at its multipurpose pack houses in Goodwill and Portsmouth. 55-pound bags with the following formulae and uses with prices as follows. 12 24 12, the price is now $60. 5 for 30, which is first stage of root crops and plantains, that is also $60. And 16 8 28, which is for tree crops. These bags of 55-pound bags fertilizers have been reduced to $60. It's supposed to be okay. Apologies. The 15 15 15 is at $60, and the 16 8 28, which is for tree crops, is $65. The original price, of course, was $75 for all the bags of fertilizers, and of course, now depending on what you would like to use them for, they have been reduced to $60 and or $65 depending on your purchase. It is being sold at the Bayfront office with delivery to the multipurpose pack houses on Goodwill Road, and also sold and delivered to the multipurpose pack houses at Longhouse in Portsmouth. So please place your orders for your fertilizers with Dexia. Ladies, we take a break just for a very short bit. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back to Standards in the Spotlight right here on your nation station at DBS Radio. And of course, tonight we are speaking, developing a national standardization strategy. Naomi Bani Sampson, Technical Officer, Standards Development at the Bureau of Standards, and Dr. McKaby Walcott, Consultant, UNIDO-funded NSS Development Project. And of course, this is the topic that we are speaking of tonight, right here on Standards in the Spotlight. Mrs. Banis, let me come back to you here in Dominica. I want to ask, what does Dominica's participation in this project mean? It has to have some kind of meaning for us, particularly as we are a small island developing state. What does it mean for us?
I believe that our participation in a project like this is really a pathway to overcoming many of the challenges that we face, as you said, as a small island developing state. We will get to see what other countries are doing as well. So that's important. And Dr. Walcott mentioned the fact that, you have that knowledge sharing and being able to exchange information. So their approach to the development of their strategy, how they engage their stakeholders, what are some of their priorities, we can learn from that. It will allow us also to leverage the regional collaboration, and we will get to benefit from the expertise of the consultants. And Dr. Walcott, I know, comes from the little that I know of her, comes with a wealth of knowledge and wealth of experience as well, and she'll be able to pass that on to us, because our bureau definitely would have had we may have capacity limitations, and so we get to get that information from other countries.
I know I've spoken a lot about, how standards serve as a boost to, the productive sectors and key areas such as trade, public health, safety. I know we've had a big emphasis on safety. But can you share with us, an example of how using the strategy to prioritize, like as a priority, how using it has impacted the various sectors? I've mentioned, three sectors here: trade, public health, safety. How has it impacted, or how can it also further impact these sectors and probably other sectors as well?
One of the things I think we can note is that all of the sectors, they really are interrelated. You cannot think of your trade without you think of things like agriculture or manufacturing. So a lot of them, they are cross-cutting. So take the agricultural sector, for instance. That's one of our key sectors. And so by prioritizing standards for the agro-processing and food safety, the strategy ensures that the local producers can meet international requirements, such as those for what we call the hazard analysis and critical control points, which is HACCP, and ISO 22000, which is a standard for food safety management. So this not only facilitates access to the export markets, but also improves the quality and the safety, as we mentioned, of the products that we have here for local consumption. I also wanted to look at the cocoa industry as another example. By adopting regionally harmonized standards, small producers will be able to improve their product quality. They can achieve certifications and secure higher prices on international markets. And we've seen cases where this approach has enhanced sector specific support. And by that I mean the availability of technical training or even projects that can be written for improvements to, well, in the case that I'm speaking, cocoa related infrastructure. And of course, this can help to directly boost productivity and increase income for cocoa producers and processors, which is what we ultimately want. I something that I wanted to do a bit more research on, but I would like to think, I'm not sure if you heard of the Trinitario variety of cocoa from Trinidad. It's a hybrid and it's considered one of the finest cocoa varieties. And right now, because of that brand, you can fetch a much higher price for that particular brand of cocoa. So, in a system like that, I would expect that the country would have set aside priorities for developing standards for producers, for people who grow the cocoa, for people who process the cocoa of that particular variety, making the bringing it up to a particular standard that when you hear the term Trinitario cocoa, you immediately think of quality and special, and you are willing to pay higher prices for cocoa like that. So similar prioritization could benefit other sectors like tourism or fisheries, where aligning your standards with international best practices, they can lead to improved market access, investment, and sustainability. So the NSS is really a targeted approach that maximizes resources and ensures that sectors with the greatest potential for growth within your country, in our case, those sectors they're impacted, their impact are prioritized effectively.
I want to ask, you spoke about many sectors, but I want to also get how the strategy, tell us, speak to us how the strategy fits into the broader goals of the bureau, because we know that the Bureau of Standards is the entity responsible to ensure everything is of top quality. Let's I can go to Guyana or Trinidad, and if I see a particular product, I know it has to be of a particular standard and so on. Speak to us of how this strategy fits into the goals of the bureau.
Well, firstly, the NSS, it really provides us with a focus, a focal point, a strategic framework that will guide our activities. And so once the NSS is complete, each of the units at the Bureau will be able to plan their specific activities, initiatives, or programs based off of those priorities. So it helps with the synchronization of what we are doing in the office as well. And then, so we know that the Bureau's primary mandate is to ensure the development, promotion, implementation, and the maintenance of standards that support trade, as we said, public health and safety and economic growth and so on. All our work at the bureau, it really revolves around standards. So the NSS will strengthen that mandate by getting us to prioritize these key areas where the standards are needed most, and that will ensure that our resources as well are directed towards the sectors with the greatest potential for impact. So at the end of the day, it makes sense that we would decide, okay, we want to develop standards in relating to ecotourism, because that has been a big thing, and more you see in Dominica, the different parts of the tourism sector getting awards. You have hotels being number one in this, you have those different types of things. So we want to make sure that we are, as you said, we are the cornerstone of quality and so on in the country. We want to ensure that we can use our strategy to help guide us through that. It also provides a roadmap for building capacity within the bureau, and that's something that we love to do, build people at the bureau. Sometimes when I hear, or you know so I might meet someone random and ask, in discussion, realize that that person worked at the bureau at one point in their life. So it's a place where people can grow. And so with the staff, once they are trained, we will be able to better support the industries and address the gaps in our quality infrastructure. And in that way, the NSS ensures that the bureau's initiatives are not only effective but also contribute directly to Dominica's sustainable development and resilience.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the consultations and some of the public engagements. Dr. Walter, I'm going to rope you in on this one. Now, I would expect that in the development of such a document, that there will be consultations to narrow down national priority areas of all the different sectors. Dr. Walcott, can you tell us what consultations look like under such a project? How are the different stakeholders being engaged?
Okay, so yes, you are absolutely correct. Under this project, consultations are essential. The consultations are required to identify the national priority areas. It is through consultation the different stakeholders will be articulating what their challenges are and articulating and identifying how these priorities are going to be assessed and categorized. So based on the limitations within each country, we also want to ensure that the strategy in itself is implementable. Sometimes we have strategies that are so lofty that the implementation is quite difficult because maybe um, the resources required for implementation was not taken into consideration. So part of this um, strategy is going to take into consideration resource requirements for implementation to ensure that at the end of the day, there is a successful implementation of the strategy. So the stakeholders are going to be engaged. We've identified, based on the timelines for this project, that in-person consultation is going to be maybe the more effective way of doing that. So there will be upcoming in-person engagement consultations in Dominica. And we're hoping that there is the wide participation of stakeholders. In addition, consultation is also taking place through a survey that has already been launched, and also one-on-one meetings with various stakeholders, whether in person or virtually. if stakeholders are unable to participate in one method or the other. This approach is really designed to ensure that there is inclusivity and diversity, and we are able to attract the participation of all stakeholders across Dominica. These engagements, obviously, we anticipate the participation from the government ministries, the private sector associations, the NGOs, even the academic institutions, local businesses, different community leaders, and also the voices of our indigenous communities are also very important and being considered in the development of the strategy.
Mrs. Barnes Sampson, if I can rope you in here as well, who are the key stakeholders as it relates to this? And after, I'll just shoot the two questions out one time. Either one of you can share with the listening audience, both on radio and our social media platforms, what are some of the recurring themes, or let's say the some of the preliminary priorities emerging from the initial consultation so far?
Well, Dr. Walcott mentioned some of those key stakeholders, because if we have to go down into the specific names, we wouldn't leave DBS tonight. So, what we kind of did was group them based on the different sectors and those that are important. So what I would like all listeners to do is, if you hear your category where you fit in, just know that we would love to get some input from you. As we said, we have the survey out now, and we are going to have a in-person consultation coming up soon. So just to share again, is government ministries. So if you fall under that category, regulatory bodies such as Discover Dominica Authority, the IRC, the NTRC. We also have industry and private sector associations like Dominica Hotel and Tourism Association, DAIC, those organizations. Then we have our non-governmental organizations, if you feel community-based organization, even grassroots organizations, larger organizations you feel that we can you can contribute to our research, then you can come and share. You also mentioned academic institutions, so any of the schools, we love to hear from you as well, and our local community groups and leaders. So those are our key stakeholders. So
So
anywhere you fit
yes,
under that category, you
we'll
can
be
take
coming
our
to you.
survey, you can
Yes,
reach out
yes.
to us
We,
as
we'll
well.
talk about that survey coming up. But so these are the key stakeholders. But other than the key stakeholders, there are also the emerging priority. What are some of the emerging the priorities that are coming up with that?
Okay, so before I start, I just wanted to share that how we came up with the list of what we are calling the reoccurring themes was based on looking at the different sectors and the level of contribution of different sectors to the GDP of Dominica. We looked at the exports, what's being exported from Dominica. We looked at imports. We looked at the current national development plans and different sector development strategies, and also did some preliminary research on what was being discussed by the average Dominica through the media, whether radio, television, or social media. And it's interesting that some of the reoccurring themes include issues related, number one, to climate resilience and disaster preparedness. And I'm sure the listeners could fully understand that Dominica's commitment to becoming the world's first climate resilient nation has definitely highlighted this as a priority. Some of those priorities could be related to ensuring resilient infrastructure. We're looking at issues relating to strengthening the building codes and construction materials to ensure that these codes and materials can withstand, for example, hurricanes and any other extreme weather events. As it relates to disaster risk management, for example, developing standards for emergency preparedness, early warning systems, even post-disaster recovery. Again, sustainable land and water management also shows up to ensure that they are promoting standards in relation to watershed management and land use planning to mitigate landslides and flooding. So these are some of the themes that come up all under the thematic area of climate resilience and disaster preparedness. Another thematic area for Dominica is agriculture and food security, and I'm sure I don't have to go into that in detail. There, as Mrs. Banis indicated, we're talking about the introduction of new technologies in agriculture. And there's the discussion and the implementation of what is now being called climate smart agriculture. What does that mean to Dominica? What does that mean to the standards world in relation to the development of standards to ensure climate smart agriculture? Um, there has been the discussion in Dominica in relation to the priority areas in agriculture, the 5 Cs: coffee, cocoa, coconut, citrus, and I think your Prime Minister mentioned the silent C, cannabis. So the 5 Cs, and then you have the root crops and bananas to some extent, agro processing and food safety and quality. Again, under the thematic area of agriculture and food security. Another thematic area is ecotourism and adventure tourism. This is showing up as an area of opportunity, really, for Dominica to ensure that Dominica's natural beauty and biodiversity creates significant potential for ecotourism, but in doing so in a sustainable way. That would be the Dominica brand in relation to Dominica being a sustainable tourism destination. So through standardization, the development of standards, what does that look like or can look like for Dominica? Service quality within the tourism sector, we want the visitor experience to be exceptional. So what are some of the service quality standards in relation to accommodation, our hiking trails, our transportation services, etc.? Another thematic area that comes to mind is that of obviously renewable energy and the green economy. For Dominica, we're talking about geothermal energy standards, solar and wind energy, and also I think the Bureau has already started discussions, and even on a regional level, the push and promotion of energy efficiency and the development of energy efficiency related standards and programs to accompany that. Waste management and environmental protection is something that I saw emerging as well. We also cannot forget digital transformation and ICT development. Dominica's ICT sector is definitely emerging and is critical for its broader developmental goals. So these are just some areas that come to mind. You can't forget healthcare and public health as well. And so these are some of the thematic areas that we will be discussing with stakeholders during our in-person consultation to be able to dig a little deeper to understand where there is a need, how is that going to be prioritized, and what are the specific standards that stakeholders need to meet developmental goals or safety requirements, trade requirements, etc. So just for Matt, just not to take up too much time, these are some of the areas on the top of the list for discussion during the stakeholder consultation, and any others that come up during that time.
We have just a few more minutes left on the program. Mrs. Banis Sampson, I wanted us to talk about the survey. I know we don't have much time left, but give us a little bit of information on the survey that has been posted up. Give us some details. Where can people go to take the survey? Can they call? What's the survey all about? Tell us a bit more about the survey.
So sure. We indicated earlier that we recently launched a public survey to gather feedback from stakeholders. The survey is a way to ensure that everyone's voice is heard as it relates to our priority areas, and that when we are implementing the strategy through our policies or programs and services, that they are reflective of the diverse needs of our population. So how can you participate? Honestly, this survey is very short. It would take you approximately 5 minutes um, for to complete it, and you can visit the bureau's social media pages where we have already published it on Facebook and Instagram, and you can access it there. If you wish for it to be emailed to you directly, simply reach out to the office. You can leave an email address or number so we can send it to you. We are extending the deadline. I think the first deadline is up to the 31st of January, but we're extending it another month, the 28th of February, just to ensure that as many of you get a chance to participate as possible.
All right. As we, wrap up right here, people might be listening and saying, there probably should be like a timeline on this. When can we expect the national standardization strategy to be finalized and implemented?
So I think we just a second.
The aim for finalizing the national standard strategy
Yeah.
is April, the end of April.
Okay.
The methodology for finalizing it involves us doing the stakeholder consultation, taking that feedback from the stakeholder consultation to put the first draft of the national standard strategy in place, and then coming back to stakeholders with the draft national standard strategy for validation. And once we have the validation from the different countries on their national standardization strategy, the it would be finalized. And then implementation would take place by the country, usually through the Dominica Bureau of Standards, but also it's important to note that the implementation of a national standard strategy is something that's implemented by all stakeholders. So there would be, for example, other stakeholders that may have elements of the strategy themselves for implementation.
And of course, based on all the information coming from the different islands, they would have to, come together in one area. And then, of course, everything would be put together and then sent back out to implement. Basically, that's how it would kind of work, Doctor.
Yes, to
Okay.
some extent. So
Okay.
yes, so
Okay.
it's usually comes to cross-queue when they put it together.
Yes.
But then implementation would be by individual countries.
I want to speak very, very, very quickly on the stakeholder aspect. Mrs. Barney Sampson, and very quickly, Dr. Walcott, what are you asking of stakeholders when you approach them for information, data specifically about this national standardization strategy? Dr. Walcott, let me come to you quickly.
I think my first question to all stakeholders would be, what are the challenges that you are facing in relation to your businesses, for example? Because the focus for this is looking to ensure that the needs of small and medium-sized enterprises are met. So that would be a simple question. What are the challenges that you are being faced? And then we discuss whether or not through standards development or standards implementation, we can help support businesses to address those challenges.
Okay.
So that's the first question that I would ask.
All right. And Mrs. Sampson, from your end?
Yes, it's we really want to know what are the issues that they're facing, and then we want to know what sectors they have thing, and then they too to share what some of their priority areas are, maybe within their own organizations, and that can help us as well.
All right. So when the Dominica Bureau of Standards comes to you, please don't be shy. It's not anything, anything bad. In fact, on the contrary, it's actually to make you and Dominica a lot better. Of course, we are wrapping up right here. Thank you so much, Mrs. Banis Sampson and Dr. Walcott, for joining us this evening to engage in this very, as always, informative and very importantly, educational discussion on the development of a national standardization strategy for Dominica. It's definitely been an enlightening discussion, and I am sure our listeners who are listening to us on all our frequencies, television channels, and YouTube and Facebook as well have gained a greater appreciation for the importance of standardization in Dominica and why it's necessary to set our priority areas as a nation. We want to encourage you to share your voice on priority areas for developing standards in Dominica by taking about 5 minutes of your time, as Mrs. Barney Sampson indicated, and complete the Bureau's stakeholder survey. It's available on the Bureau's website and the social media page. Your input is valuable. You can check out the social media page to get access. If you have any questions, you want to learn more, go to www.dominicastandards.org. You can send us an email at info@dominicastandards.org. You can contact the office 235-1592. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Dominica Bureau. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Walcott. Thank you very much. And Mrs. Barney Sampson, once again, another great educational and very informative program tonight. It's Standards in the Spotlight, and of course tonight's topic was developing a national standardization strategy. Ladies, good evening to you, and thanks again.
Good evening, Fado.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.